I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're three Black moms.
She's touching me. He's looking at me. Mom, make him stop. They won't leave me alone. When my children were small, they always had some kind of crazy conflict. When we had to go on long trips, like if we were going on vacation or going somewhere to see the relatives and we were going to be in the car for longer than 20 minutes, I used to seat myself in the back between two of them, and one privileged child got to sit in the front with their father. And I remember my sister in law said, "You are letting those children control you." I would never sit in the back myself with children just so that they wouldn't fight. Well, lo and behold, years later, when she had four rambunctious boys of her own, and I saw her sitting in the back between them on trips, she didn't even remember that she had ever said that. Now, children will fight, make up, fight again when they're little. And I remember a lot of times as a child myself, I didn't really get into fights with other neighborhood kids. I got beat up kind of a lot by this little boy we used to call Little Man. And mama would have to come and save me. But in dealing with fighting between your own children, because kids always make up when they're little, but what about bullying from other kids? Do you see yourself as intervening on your child's behalf? Okay, sisters, let's talk about some of the times we had growing up and also some of the times we've had to intervene for our own kids when there's been bullying involved.
Well, I'll start because actually we're talking more this week on sibling rivalry. And I'm the middle child. So
The
I am
link in the
I am the
chain.
link. I am the link between, the oldest and the youngest. And I remember something that Daddy said years ago. Now, Daddy was the second child of 10. And I remember him kind of out of the blue saying, you know, don't talk to each other really mean. Don't start yelling about, I'm going to knock your head off or, I hate you or anything like that because kids will grow up hating each other and you can't. And I remember him saying that. And there was a lot of conflict in his family with some of the sisters, especially in the later years. And there were a lot of people, like they're all gone now, but a lot of those people had some really hard feelings toward each other. And they wanted to draw some of the other siblings into their nonsense, which is what I kind of felt it was, because things like money always makes it really nasty, and people, go to war over things like that. So and luckily I only had the one, so she did not have that same kind of rivalry. She didn't have to have that. She really didn't have to deal with the kind of bullying where she was physically in danger or any of that kind of stuff. There was a lot of the mean girl stuff when she went to school, and I have to say probably some of it was racist too, because she went to a mostly white school. So I didn't deal with that, but I do remember that Daddy had that advice for siblings, because one thing you have to remember, if you have siblings, when your parents are gone, they're your only link to your past. They're the ones, they are your family. And if you can't get along with them, and obviously, if anybody who reads advice columns knows that this is a big thing, especially around the holidays, and there's all kind of things that come up, you really have to kind of deal with the stuff when they're young and let them know that, you know what, you all have to get along. And you also have to be willing to confront the one who is the troublemaker. Because sometimes there's one instigator. I'm talking to you, Barbara, who is always who is really the one, for whatever reasons, maybe they're the oldest and they get away with stuff, or they don't.
They get practiced on is what
They
happens
get
when you're the
practiced
oldest.
on.
Really practice child.
Or they're the youngest, and they
by the time they get to the youngest, the parents are just too tired. It's like
they're too tired to do anything. They don't, you know what, you're on your own. They don't want to do nothing. But you have to kind of take your place in the family. But you also have to realize that you have a place, and it's an important one in the family too.
Well, I think when you have
the youngest.
Yes. Well, now I remember a lot of times feeling really sad and left out, like when you and Barbara would go someplace and I'd be left behind because, like, oh, you're too young. So, I do remember that. So being the youngest, sometimes it's not always the best position. But there is the reality that sometimes your parents, by the time they get to that youngest, they're tired, they're not as strict. The first child is the practice child. The middle child might be the one they ease up on a little bit, and they kind of expect them to just follow
this
along.
is what I really remember. This is funny because I remember that, and we used to get our butts beat, but
regularly.
Barbara and I would pretty much get it the same. Mama stopped hitting as hard by the time she got to you.
Her arm was tired.
Her arm was tired by then. So, but and of course, we've already
she couldn't find all her weapons.
Yeah. But the one thing that I do know, and I always say this, is that I had to go through everything twice. You all each had to do things once. As the middle child, I always had to do it twice.
Why is that?
Because I was the middle. When Barbara and I used to have to dress alike, Barbara and I used to have to dress alike. Then you and I had to start dressing alike, Naima.
That's right. That's right.
Because I was in the middle, it was me.
So you had it just like both of us at different times.
Exactly.
Well, I got the hand-me-downs until I outgrew both of you.
Until you outgrew both of us.
But I until that time I got the hand-me-downs, which means they'd gone through two people. So it was real raggedy by the time I got them.
No, because I wasn't raggedy on my clothes. I wasn't.
And I used to sneak and wear mama's clothes.
Oh,
yes.
Well,
yes. Until you outgrew those.
Yeah.
So, so we all have these weird positions. I always felt like I had to be the fixer because I had more volatile tempers. And of course,
were you the fixer or the instigator?
I was the fixer. Now later on, I learned how to be the instigator, but not in the family. That was more like for colleagues and stuff. I
remember us having to fight on who's going to sit by the window in the car.
And that was
I usually end up the one in the middle. So
who was always in the middle?
It was usually me.
No,
and in those days, the cars had a big hump in the middle.
Yeah, when I was the littlest one, I had to be in the middle.
Yes,
and I started growing, and
as you got older, because both of you all fought about the window, I sat in the middle.
Okay.
Well, that's
now. When it came to fights, and some families, it's like, okay, if you all fight, everybody's in trouble. And I think because our mother was like an equal opportunity beating person.
Who did it? Oh, well, you all gonna get it.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So it didn't matter. But I do think that parents really should pay attention just for the sake of teaching justice. Try to get to the bottom of things. Don't just punish because they're fighting, but really try to help their children iron out a conflict and come to a fair conclusion. Because you can carry resentments about stuff for a lifetime. And we've all seen families where the grown children, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they're still mad at each other about something that happened in childhood. and they're still mad because this one was the favorite, or that one got away with this, or all, and they're still carrying that. And they're old, and you think, get over it. But I think parents have a lot to do with that.
Those kind of things come from a deep place of woundedness that has not been healed, because to carry that kind of pain where you are still angry at a sibling over something that happened between you that was significant then, but it should not carry that same weight now, years later. There's something there that needs to be touched. Now, I will tell a story because since I had three, once I was away at a girls' getaway. Well, we were right there in the city. We had a thing, and then I get this phone call from Lavinia that John had gotten hurt. I had left. Lavinia must have been like 14 or 15, and but then after saying that John was hurt, then she quickly said, "Oh, he'll be all right. He'll be all right." But I knew I need to go home. My friends are saying, "Oh no, they're fine. They're fine." I go, "No, I gotta go." Yeah. So I get home, and what had happened is Lavinia had said something to John, and John had said, "You ain't the boss of me." And she picked up a salt shaker. Now you have to see this salt shaker to see how heavy it was. And she flung it at him. She hit him in the face. And then there was a lot of blood because anything from your head is gonna be
blood always means somebody's in trouble.
Yep. So I get there, I had to take him to the hospital. He had to have like 3 or 4 or 5 stitches. And Lavinia was so frightened. She was afraid she was going to go to jail. She kept saying, "Am I going to jail? Am I going to jail? Am I going to jail?" And I tried to explain to the nurse what had happened because I didn't want her to think that I was guilty of child abuse. I brought the offending weapon with me to show her it was this heavy salt shaker. And she said, "Well, I'm sure that he must have done something to her too." She was extremely understanding. She did not berate me for being a bad parent or any of that kind of stuff. She was very supportive, and I felt relieved because I thought if anybody's going to jail, it's going to be me. And so anyway, John to this day still has a little scar in his eyebrow from where that is. You know what's funny? Royal has the same kind of mark. Because when he was like 2 at the daycare, he ran into a side of the wall. They called Lorelai. She had to leave work and take him to go with them to the hospital, meet them at the hospital and get stitches. Poor little thing. And I said, "Oh, you look like your Uncle John, weapons of war."
That is interesting. He's got the same scar.
So how did you deal with Lavinia?
Yeah.
I'm looking back and thinking how sorrowful and repentant she was over that incident, because she kept saying, "I did not realize I had such a bad temper." I think it was a reckoning with herself over that incident that she could lose control. I mean, I don't know up until then if she'd ever gotten really angry at something. But I will say, and this isn't to excuse how my kids would react to each other, but I felt like after we moved away from the situation that we were in, that my kids' personalities actually blossomed. They were, how do I describe it? They
angry.
They felt the freedom to be children, to be themselves. And we dealt with each situation as it came up, whether they were in arguments with each other or fighting. I did a number of those child experiments, where I said, when you lose your temper, you can't take back what you say, by doing the toothpaste thing, where I held up $1 and said, "If you can squeeze all the toothpaste out of this tube, I'll give you $1. All 3 of them did it. Then I held up a 20 and said, "If you can get the toothpaste back in the tube, I'll give you this 20. And try as they would, nobody could do it. And I said, "This is like your temper. If you say something mean, even when you say you're sorry, you cannot take it back." And I would do those kind of little things I learned from different focus on the family things, on dealing with your kids' behavior and stuff. I think some of those things are kind of helpful in being a visual and driving home how you should act to each other. My kids today, they don't have any kind of grudges or fights or any of that kind of stuff with each other. Even when they are in disagreement, they love each other and they get along very well as adult children and they listen to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think part of that, it comes with maturity. You do have to get to a point where they go through a process of transformation from the children's stage,
Especially during the
stage.
adolescent years,
Yeah, because
The scary years.
yeah,
the dark times.
yeah, 12, 13,
That's what I
14,
call,
15,
the
16.
adolescent years of the dark times.
But,
Um,
I think probably with Zakia, because she, like Sarah, kind of grew up an only child, all of her siblings from my husband's previous marriage, they were grown when she was born. I mean, they were in their late teens when she was born. So they didn't grow up together in that sense where, they could really have that sort of sibling relationship. I mean, Martina, who was, in her teens when Zakia was an infant and, and growing up, um, she was the only one who really had the experience of being in the house, but she was such an older sister, so it still
Right.
wasn't like they were still trying to do the same things. That there was a period Zakia would follow her around and try to do everything she did and want to paint her nails like Martina and, do everything like Martina, So, I mean, she had that thing that you do with your older sister and try to be like her, but there was not a rivalry in that sense. So I think probably Zakia's sibling experience came when I took over to Barbara's house, and she's got two cousins. They're all the same age and everything. So in terms of all the whatever arguments you have with people your age, that's what she experienced with them. She had another cousin, Catherine, that would come over periodically, but not that often. So she didn't have as much of a sibling experience where she had to share toys all the time or share attention all the time. But I think it's important for children to learn how to share attention or how to share toys or how to share their parents with another child. When parents don't do that well, like when they are obviously more attentive to one child than another, that's what creates that anger that doesn't go away.
that resentment,
That
yes.
resentment when you're clearly, somebody's your favorite or the other one, one that you praise because they get the good grades or they're better looking or whatever it is, and the other one you talk about and make them feel inadequate. I've seen adults where that the resentment between the siblings is still there, and they still might even bring up stuff, and and the parents, I tend to blame the parents that exacerbated that. And I don't know what that is in grown people that would make them purposely pit children against each other.
Well, I think
Like
sometimes
you know.
parents compare and they think that it's a motivator, and it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's not. If you are always being told you're not as good as your sister or your brother or whatever, you're not motivated to, to do anything but resent that person.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that. I mean, and like I said, fortunately or unfortunately, Sarah did not have that. And I worried about her growing up as an only, but she still shares her parents. Most of her friends refer to me as mom, and she's like, oh, everybody wants you to be, their parent. And she's always been generous with sharing, because she knows, okay, obviously she's the favorite, but she knows that she can come to me and to Sean and ask us to do things for her friends that maybe their parents won't do, or pick them up or take them somewhere or let them do this or whatever. So it's interesting that she had learned to be generous because she's always sought a kind of a sibling relationship. And if it's Sigma Gamma Rho, her sorority, where she's got all these sisters all over the world now, or the sisterhood that she has formed in a sense with her friends here, her roommate, her colleagues at work. So she's always looking for that. And so she's always, because she's confident. But I'd like to think that even if we had been fortunate enough to have another one, that she would still be that confident. And that's what you're trying to give your kids, confidence, though, that they have room. And let's face it, sometimes kids aren't going to get along no matter what you do. Sometimes they're just too different, or they're just, they're not the yin and yang, they're the, Hatfields and McCoys, and sometimes that'll happen, but you have to let them understand you are still family. This is barring, of course, that there wasn't anything uh egregious, and I mean like physical, sexual violence, things like that happen in families, and people are still turning around and saying, "Oh, you got to forgive them and move on."
No,
If
Or
everybody,
pretending like it didn't happen, like these
yes,
women that
you
took
got to
their
deal with it.
father to court after they were adults, and he still denied that he had molested them. And
Yes,
like you, Naima, I blame the parents for allowing that kind of sibling rivalry to move past the place of normalcy where it just becomes vicious. I
yeah,
think that it is really important for parents to value each child for their own identity, for their own self, for their own person, not pit them against each other in any kind of way to make one feel lesser than the other. I have seen that happen with parents and their kids. It's not just in the movies, and you can readily see the problem when you're watching some kind of adventure story where you see one parent is preferring one child over another. These
like
things
I don't know. Did you all see that
really,
movie?
really happen.
What was that movie? Was it Boys to Men? No, no, no. What was it? What was that movie with Cuba Gooding Jr. and
um, um, Boys in the Hood.
Boys in the Hood? That was it.
Oh, yes.
And the
Yeah.
mother was so
Yes.
obviously favoring the older child, who was, the athletics, the
Football
athlete, the
star,
football
yeah.
star, and all of that. And then the younger one, who she didn't like him because she didn't like his father. I've seen that happen a lot, where
Yeah.
if children are of different parentage, there's a very obvious preference of one to another. Or if there's a big difference, like this one here is the smart one, and this one here is the dumb one. I mean, I've seen parents do that. And like you say, they might think they're being motivational. Oh, well, your sister got A's and you only got a C, thinking they're saying things that's going to motivate you, but you can't do that because children have different abilities. So, hey, if you tried your best, whatever you did, that's fine. And I see parents doing that all the time, which is what creates jealousy. When you set a standard because of one child, and then if the other one doesn't measure up, and I don't know if Cheryl, if you ever experienced this being the second child. If Barbara does something, she's like a trailblazer. Okay, Barbara did this, so you should be able to do this too, or whatever. And we all have different personalities. So,
oh, you're Barbara's sister when you go to school.
Yeah.
So obviously I had to measure up. Of course, I was always much better, so it was fine. But
well, I don't mind telling you this, but the first murder was between two brothers.
Yes,
where
we
Cain
know.
was jealous of his brother Abel, who was doing all the right stuff. And then even when the Lord appealed to him, he was still angry, and I don't want to hear it, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to take my brother out.
Now, did you blame the parents in that situation?
Yes, because there was obviously, even though
Favoritism.
you can deduce that there was a different treatment, even in that first family, for one to be preferred and the other one to not.
And see, that's the lesson that people don't get out of that Bible story. Do not play favoritism among your children.
Yes, yes. You know what? It's funny because
the story is
because all of us, because Barbara was the first, obviously, to go to college, and so our parents, I know Mama wanted us to go to the same college.
Yeah, and all this
time
breaking out of this mold of, oh, you Barbara sister, oh, you Cheryl sister. No, nobody knows.
I didn't. Well, this is the thing that's funny about this whole thing, is that I got into Bradley and you got into K-State.
Yeah.
But we all wanted to
all
do
of us decided to
something
do something
different
different.
because part of the reason for me going so far and going
He
somewhere where I
was a
didn't know
person
each
that was
other.
not kind. And I'm thinking you guys did better off going to totally different schools
Oh,
altogether.
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Because we were all journalism majors. And
Yes,
I
we
didn't
would have
want,
had all the same
we
teachers.
would
Yeah.
have had all the same teachers, all the same issues. Not only that, it was like, okay, but you like you said, Barbara, I didn't want to be just Barbara's sister. I didn't want to be Betty and Celia's friend. I didn't want to be, I wanted to
Yeah.
be someone who I hadn't been for the
Right.
first 17 years
Right.
of my life, where I knew all the same people and, pretty much grew up in the same house from forever. And I wanted to forge my own path. And because you would have been there as a freshman when I was a senior, if you had gone to K-State, it would have been the same thing. Do you live in the same dorm? Do you do this? Do you try out for Pridettes? Do and it's like, do you have to do all the same things?
Yeah.
You
That's just
don't.
what you did.
You don't. And
Yeah.
because you didn't make the same child, I don't care if you all look exactly alike. I don't
Even
care
if you're identical twins, you're not the
you
same
didn't
person.
make the same child. Stop
Right.
making them do the same thing.
Yes. So that's another thing parents should not do. Discover who your child is as an individual. Do not try to make them be the same. Even if they are twins, even if they are identical twins, they're not the same soul. So they're going to have different personalities, maybe different interests. Discover who they are. Let them be who they are. Value who they are, and do not try to make one feel like they're lesser than the other. Even if one gets great grades, one may be the athlete, the other one might have no athletic skills. One may excel academically, the other one may struggle. You have all kinds of things, but hey, if you're gonna learn from that first family, like Barbara calls them, do not be so obvious in your favoritism of one over another, because that can cause some lifelong bitterness, some viciousness, and unforgiveness, and it can last forever. And like Cheryl said, when you get grown and your parents are gone, all you have is each other.
Yep.
So
Oh my goodness, like just this past Thanksgiving, I watched this movie with Alfred Woodard called What's Cooking, and they zeroed in on 4 different families around Thanksgiving. And I'm telling you, the drama that erupted from unresolved issues among the adult children. Great movie. What's Cooking? I checked it out of the library.
Yeah, it's something to learn, but we got to go. But if you've got some issues in your family, you may want to talk about them and resolve them. And if you see your children and they're getting into their teen years and they're still
quibbling,
yes, you probably want to get to the bottom of that before they leave for college, because they really need to be friends.
Make things right.
Yes, absolutely. Well, make sure you like and subscribe our YouTube page and our Facebook page, and join us every Sunday, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, and feel free to leave your comments. How do you handle sibling rivalry among your children? Maybe you saw a little bit of it this Thanksgiving holiday. Tell us what you think. Until next week, I'm Naima.
I'm Cheryl.
I'm Barbara, and we are 3 Black moms. Hi, I'm Barbara.
I'm Cheryl.
And I'm Naima. We're 3 Black moms.